Hey guys, I'm going to show you how to factor some trinomials. So what I like to do to start, and if when you get really good at these, you won't have to do this necessarily, but factoring, I'm just going to start by writing the sum, product, a box, and then I'm going to start filling in what I know. So you're going to be given the problem with just say something like 10x squared minus 26x plus 12. You're going to write down sum, product, and a box. Then we start filling those things in. So the sum, it comes from right here. It's whatever is attached to x, not x squared, just x. It's typically the middle term if everything's in order. So our sum would be negative 26. And then we're going to find our product. So our product comes from the quadratic coefficient and our constant being multiplied together. In this case, 120. Now, there's two things in the box that I can fill in right away as well. So there's a 10, x squared, and a 12. So the box, the first term in our quadratic goes in the first box. The last term in our quadratic goes in the last box. And then we need to figure out what goes in the other two boxes, and that's why we have our sum and product. So two numbers that multiply to make 120, and that also add up to negative 26. Well, I'm just going to write some products down, or some numbers that would work to get the product, some factors of it. So 120, 30 times 4, 20 times 6. And then I'm going to play around with them. So they can be plus or minus. And in this case, they both have to be minus because I need them to be negatives to get the 120 and to get the negative 26. So 30 and 4 doesn't work. It would give me negative 34. 20 and 6, though, that could work. So negative 20 times negative 6, 120, and negative 20 plus negative 6 equals negative 26. Now, I want you to be very careful because it's okay to get the numbers right, but then we got to make sure our signs, either a plus or minus, is correct as well. So my two numbers are negative 20 and negative 6, so I put those in, negative 20, and remember I'm going to have an x here, and negative 6x. And then I'm going to have to go ahead and see what I can take out of, say, I'll look at the 10x squared and the negative 20x. What do they have in common? That's what goes above them. So what they have in common is 10x, and 10x times what is going to be 10x squared? Well, that's just going to be x. And if we look at that too, 10x squared and negative 6x, the only thing that they really necessarily have in common, we could have taken out a 2, and we might have to momentarily, but we could have taken out a 2x out of there as well. But moving along, we have the negative 6x in the 12, and we're going to put a negative 6 above that because negative 6 times x is negative 6x. And then if we put a negative 2 down here, we get negative 2 times 10x, which is negative 20x, and negative 2 times negative 6 is negative 12. So that does work out, and we end up with our two factors. Now, the final step is just taking them and writing them in our parentheses. So x minus 2 and 10x minus 6. And we don't have to solve or anything. If we did, just watch the solving video, you would have that equal to 0, and you would go ahead and solve. For our next one, you notice that there's no leading coefficient, so that changes our problem a little bit, but not too much. I'm going to still do the same thing. I write sum, product, in a box. I fill in the pieces of the box that I know. So m squared, first thing goes in the first box, last thing goes in the last box. And then I write down my sum. My sum is going to be 10. and the product of 1 and 16 is 16. So factors of 16, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16. And looking at them, well, 4 times 4 is 16, but it doesn't add up to 10. 2 times 8 is 16. It does actually add up to 10, so my numbers are going to be 8 times 2 and 8 plus 2. And I encourage you to plug these numbers in your calculator to make sure that your signs are perfect. So I'm going to put 8m here and 2m up top. What does m squared and 2m have in common? Well, they just have m in common. M times what is m squared? M. And so m times what is 8? Or if you want to be a little more methodical, you could go 8m and 16. What do they have in common? Well, I can pull 8 out of that. And if we look at that, 8 times m does give us 8m. And then our last box is going to be 2. So we got to make sure we put those together, just like on the last problem. And we have m plus 8 and m plus 2. That would be our solution. And the last trinomial that you are going to run into is what we have right here. And you're thinking that's a binomial. And you're not wrong, but it still falls under the factoring a trinomial because of this piece. These things are the same, and so I can follow the same process to find the factor. So for example, if I would write sum down, write product down, and I would get negative 64, and my sum would be 0, and I would have my box filled in. And when we find the sum of the product, well, factors of 64, 1 and 64, I know 8 times 8 is 64. One of those would have to be negative, and that actually works out perfectly because 8 times negative 8 is 64, and 8 minus 8 is 0. So that's why this process works, but there's one little thing that we could do. When you see x squared minus 64, if you can take the square root of that number, and you want to take the square root of negative 64, you'd have to ignore the negative for that because we can't do the square root of negatives. Your calculator will give you an error. But if you can take the square root of that number, then you're going to have whatever that square root was. In this case, it's 8. So x minus 8 and x plus 8. And let's try that with a different number. So if I had x squared minus 4, well, that's actually equal to x minus 2 and x plus 4, or x plus 2, sorry. So that's the little factoring thing. Just remember, write down sum, product, your box, fill in what you know, and then use that sum and product to find the things that you don't know. Now there's a little worksheet to go along with this.